Welcome, everyone. I am Heidi Klumpkin, Youth Civic Engagement Coordinator for League of Women Voters, Minnesota. Welcome to our February webinar, Why Caucuses, or the longer and more encompassing title, Why Does Minnesota Have Caucuses and Primaries? Today, we are very happy to have Michael Wall, Youth Voter Outreach Specialist from the Office of the Secretary of State today. I grew up in Minnesota, and I remember trying to go to my first caucus in 2004. I was very unfamiliar with the process and why we even had a caucus. Some of you also may recall the caucus process in 2016. I believe we had a snowstorm in some areas, and some places were not quite prepared for the turnout, the large turnout to the caucus. So in 2020, Minnesota instituted its first presidential nominating primary in a while. Michael will tell us a little bit more about that. And then I hope that learning about both systems and how they work in Minnesota and some history about how they came to be, we can continue to educate new Minnesota voters about the ways that they can participate in the process. As a reminder, two of our major Minnesota political parties are having their caucuses next Tuesday at 7 p.m. You can also vote early and in person for the presidential nominating primary, and then on that election day on March 5th. As always, you can find more information on the Secretary of State website or your local county election website. With that, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate the chance to be here. Jackie, I don't know that we'll get through everything, but I put, before you have to go, I have to be available at all times for questions. So I put in the chat my contact information. Please feel free to contact me at any time about this or anything, especially about your league wanting to work with young people. Anywhere from kindergarten to age 29 is my portfolio in the Secretary of State's office. So that being said, let me share my screen here. And many of you may know much of this. So if you would like a copy of this to be able to use slides or the whole presentation, Heidi has it, and certainly has my permission to share it with anyone who would like a copy to use, beg, borrow, or steal from it. Feel free. So March 5th is the presidential nomination primary, yes. And February 27th, a week from today, is the caucus. The question was asked, why do we have them both? Well, that is a great question. So here's what I'm going to be trying to cover in the next 20 minutes or so. And there are some resources, some links. Again, you can get the whole presentation with those links from Heidi if you like. So we will talk about what the presidential nomination primary is, why we have it, who's running it, who can vote in it, how does it work. The key question that a lot of people seem to have in 2020, will a voter's party choice be recorded? And then the opportunity to ask questions if you like. So the presidential nomination primary, it's important to know, is new recently in its format, but not in the general information that it's collecting. Every 4 years in Minnesota, the parties want to know who people believe they should nominate as their candidate for president. It used to be done as a matter of a presidential preference poll in caucuses, and we'll get to why that's important that it used to be done there, and now has been pulled out to a primary. So what is the primary? What does it do? It allows the major political parties, of which we have 3 in Minnesota, to choose a presidential nominee. More specifically, to allow Minnesotans to say for their party or the party that they are affiliating with who they believe that party's nominee for president should be. That information is taken first state and then nationally. And anybody who's watched a few seasons of The West Wing has probably seen a convention the national convention where they fully nominate an individual. Well, those states represented in the national convention get their marching orders from this primary. Minnesota will get that information from this primary. On March 5th, or if you vote early, and you'll see in a second, there's nothing else on this ballot. That's what March 5th is for. It's only for these parties hearing from you who should they nominate as their candidate for president. And there actually are 3 ballots. This is the part that really sent some people off, the fact that there are 3 ballots, but each party has their own ballot, because this is not a contest between parties. It's so that these 3 major parties can get input on who they should be nominating as their party's candidate for president. These are what the 3 ballots look like. And these actually are sample ballots. So this is exactly what they look like. I used from my precinct, but they're all the same throughout Minnesota because they are statewide. So you'll see that on the right, the Republican has 5 candidates and a write-in, and those candidates had to be given by the party. I believe it's December 12th. I don't have the specific date, but it's far enough in advance that you can see that some of those people have already dropped out of the race. It doesn't matter at this point, because once they submit, it gets locked in. But that's what people will choose from, either when they vote early or vote in person. This was usually my next slide in talking about the presidential nomination primary, but Heidi asked me to talk about, well, why do we also have caucuses and what are we doing at the caucuses? So forget about that slide. A precinct caucus is a party meeting. It's a local party meeting. That's the nature of it. So what does that involve? It involves people who feel affiliated with that party. And in Minnesota, we don't register as party members. So it really is, who do you identify with? If you do, and do you want to spend a Tuesday evening talking with people about such things as party platform? What are the planks going to be? What are the issues and what positions should the party be taking? And again, this is transferred from the local level up, and you'll see in a second that there are meetings that happen first locally, hyper locally, and then a little more regionally by sometimes it's state legislative district, and then broader, and then statewide, and then nationally. So that representation and those ideas are discussed first really locally with your neighbors, and then broader neighbors coming together, then a broader section taking all of those results and coming together, and on and on. The note here is that in the past, parties have allowed people at their discretion to come in and observe. But when you sign into a caucus, you have the same notice that you sign at the primary now, which is that I generally agree with the principles of the party. So when you sign into DFL caucus, or legal marijuana now, they're not actually caucusing on Tuesday, it's just the Republicans and the DFL. But when you sign into either caucus, you need to sign in, and there's something that says, yes, I generally agree with the principles of this party. Because the discussions that happen in a caucus are about what the party wants to do and should do. So it isn't up to somebody in the DFL to say what the Republican Party in Minnesota should do, and the other way around. So each party, you'll see the second bullet, runs their own caucus their own way. And they may get marching orders from the state party, who may get them from the national party, but they may allow people to come in and observe. Generally, it's depending on where you are in the country, a member of a party or people who affiliate with that party. And to participate, to give ideas, to raise your hand at something, you have to be eligible to vote in November and live in that precinct. Again, these precinct caucuses are hyper-local meetings of people who affiliate with these parties. And here are the series of meetings from the precinct caucus level all the way up to the national convention that we talked about. Next Tuesday, caucuses begin at 7. There are restrictions statewide as a matter of law. There can't be classes at night in high schools or colleges. Governments, local governments don't meet. There are all these restrictions about caucus night and not conflicting with other things. Where your caucus is located is generally in a public area like a school. On our website, mnvotes.gov, you'll find the precinct caucus location, a caucus finder on our website, along with general information about caucuses. And you can always contact the party that you're interested in attending their caucus and ask specific questions. So a little bit of history here. Before Minnesota became a state, caucuses were the quintessential smoke-filled back room. It was party powerful people, pardon the alliteration, making all the decisions. That changed around the 1820s, as you'll see in the second bullet, that a number of reformers, including future President Andrew Jackson, thought that that was not right, that it should be a more public, not necessarily transparent, but more people should be able to be active and voice their opinions there, especially as it comes to picking candidates. So 1830, modern political conventions really started. It expanded the caucus process, still mostly inside people, but not a select few. So think of it more like the really active party members. A majority of states use caucuses to pick their convention delegates before 1972. And reforms designed, last bullet here, to encourage broader participation led the Democrats in the beginning to switch to primaries in many states, and then Republicans followed suit in some states. And as you can tell by Minnesota, it has gone back and forth. Making that decision is not a permanent thing necessarily. So in Minnesota, we had caucuses. 1916, we had a primary, repealed the year after. Sometimes the repeal of the law that established the primary was because the primary didn't go the way they thought it was going to go. And the party in power in some of these cases said, well, this is not, we're not accomplishing what we want, so we'll do a primary. And then the primary comes around and, oh, no. 1952, you'll see that was passed in 49 and repealed in 57. 52 and 56 were under the same swath of a single law. In 1992 was an 89 law. And then in 95, they said, well, we're not going to repeal the law, but we're going to suspend the law. And then in 99, they repealed the law. And in 2020, it was after the 2016 caucus, which was hugely attended. If you caucused in 2016, and I did, it was packed. People were standing, they were grumpy, and a lot of those people attended just to be able to participate in who should the party nominate for president for their party. And they weren't interested in the rest of what goes on, the planks of the party platform and all of that stuff. So that's where the 2020 vision of going back to primaries came up. So who runs the presidential nomination primary? You can think of it as the state doing a favor for the parties. It costs a lot of money, but it was the parties who came to the state after 2016 and said, we think this needs to be run in a way where a lot more people can participate and not have to cram themselves in a room on one night for a series of hours. Because if you can't attend the caucus, you're out of luck. There is no early voting alternative, nothing. This now allows people to participate in at least the presidential preference poll part of what used to be in the caucuses, not have to restrict themselves to one night in a series of hours, and quite honestly, not wait around for the portions of the caucus that some people are just not interested in participating in. So it split the party business with informing the parties of who voters want them to nominate as their party's nominee for president. That's the split now. The particulars here, 63 days before, the chair of the party has to submit a list. I talked about that. And once it's submitted, it's too late. So if you are Nikki Haley and you realize that there are, in addition to former President Trump, there are also a few people on there who have already dropped out, and you think it's confusing for them, you'd rather them vote for you if they know that Ron DeSantis is no longer in the race. Sorry, Nikki Haley. That's just the way it goes. Cut off, everybody's on the ballot from then on. And the chair of each party can request that write-ins be taken. It's up to that party. Who can vote in the presidential nomination primary? Exactly who can vote in any other election. The standards for who can vote is exactly the same. So everything that allows you to register to vote is what allows you to vote. You know, are you 18 by the day of the election? It used to be, when they were a part of the caucus, that the party could say, you, 17-year-old, you're going to be 18 by November 5th, so you can participate. Now they can't, because this is an official election run by the state for the parties, but still run by the state. So you need to be eligible to vote on March 5th to participate in this presidential nomination primary. So all of the rest of the things, which you're probably familiar with, including those things that have changed since 2023, the restore the vote. So if you are out from serving a felony sentence, you can vote. Everyone except those who are incarcerated, currently incarcerated for a felony, can vote. That's one of those changes. 16 and 17-year-olds who can pre-register to vote still can't vote in this. You have to be 18. The law actually says that this has to be conducted just like the August primary. It's a real election with the same opportunities that you have for any other election to vote early in person. All of those things are exactly the same. The difference, as I mentioned, the major difference here is that when someone votes in the primary, presidential nomination primary to be specific, they have to tell which ballot they want to vote on. That is recorded on their voter record, which becomes, I'm going to call it mostly private information. What does that mean? It's not something that you can pull up with a registered voters list, but it is reported to each party, the names of the voters who asked for their ballot. Before 2023, previously for the 2020, all the parties got a list of everybody who voted and which ballot they chose. That changed in 2023. So if you pull the DFL ballot, the DFL will know you asked for their ballot. That's it. Nobody ever knows who you vote for. This is still America, but they will know, just that party will know that you asked for their ballot. Same again, right to be absent from work to vote, same thing. In Minnesota, the results of this primary do bind the election of delegates for the party. This isn't advice. They asked for this election, so they have to go by the results. And the results are not tabulated in somebody's classroom, or in an auditorium as they used to be. These are done using tabulators, paper ballots, everything that makes Minnesota elections open, fair, safe, and secure. Same thing here. Already talked about separate ballots. You have to indicate. If you ask for an absentee ballot, they ask which ballot you want. If you're in a mail-only precinct where you are mailed your ballots, you actually get all three, but you're only allowed to return one. If you return more than one, it's not valid. It's like checking two people in the same race. So all those instructions are sent to those voters in mail-only ballot precincts. Talked about that, mostly private information. Talked about all of this too. Yep. Is it constitutional for the state to require voters to publicly declare a party preference? Yes. And in some states, you can't vote in the primary unless you're a member of that party, a registered member. So it's certainly constitutional. What it isn't is comfortable for every Minnesotan because they're just not used to it. So what do we tell them? If you wanted to do this in 2016, you would have to choose which party's caucus to attend and sign up with your name and address. They knew you wanted to vote in their presidential preference poll because you had to choose which party to go to. They happened simultaneously, and you had to sign in. So it's the same as that. It's just Minnesotans aren't used to that in the ballot, in the polling place. If a presidential primary is open, if anyone could vote for any of them, the party generally isn't bound to follow what the results are. In Minnesota, the agreement was, the law says the parties have to follow the outcome of the election. What does it cost? Current estimate is about $15 million. And much of that is reimbursable local costs. So this isn't an unfunded mandate. Local jurisdictions can get money to pay for what they do to run this election. And in 2020, it was below what the estimate was at 9.6 million. And there is your summary of when the nomination primary was conducted in Minnesota. And that's what we have.
This was so informative and helpful. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to stop recording now, and then we can have questions